Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me on another of my wonderful interviews. We all know that the council tax is one of those charges that has been causing problems up and down the countryside. People are falling behind, people cannot pay. Maybe the council are actually charging this under fraudulent legislation. There are many people who are challenging this in lots of different ways. Today we're going to look at this from a slightly different angle. My guest today is Mark Thompson, who's a one-parent family man, and he's on legacy benefits, and he's discovered that the council the government and the councils clearly are in cahoots and are causing fraud. Let me bring him on. Mark, welcome to the show.
Good afternoon.
It's lovely to see you there on your idyllic island in some sunnier climes.
Yeah, it's just one of those things, isn't it?
It's one of those things. But why not? You know, we need a cheery background to our life, because real life does suddenly seem to have taken a grim turn for everybody.
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah. So, well, thank you for coming on, because a lot of people are challenging the council tax on lots of different things. And we know that the council tax is, they make out that the council tax is collected and it's all sort of locally looked after and then dished out again. But we know it goes to the consolidate fund, and then the government hand money back to the council.
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, and so that's one thing that is, a bit disabling for towns and villages and cities across here, because you never quite know if it's dished out fairly and how much is actually funding overseas, things that cause people a lot of problems. Wars,
overseas transgressions.
Yes, I love it. Thank you. Now, from your perspective, you're there struggling to bring up a family, doing the right thing and all of that. And you're on legacy benefits, as of course many people will be.
Yeah.
So can you explain then what the fraud is that you've discovered is going on?
Well, back in 2008, Ian Duncan Smith, he introduced new measures towards clipping benefits, right? And part of that clipping of benefits was the benefit recipient was now having to contribute towards council tax. Okay? And what transpired was, if you didn't submit a direct debit in the March, you got a summons to go to court in the June, right? Now, I know you're aware of the block summons issues.
Yes.
And the people down in Southampton, the 6,000 people down in Southampton, which
in Portsmouth, yeah,
triggered me to respond. Well, this has been done nationwide. It isn't just individual councils. This has been done nationwide. And back when it started, I got one of these summonses where it gives you the option of going to court or not. But either respective, you're going to get fined and you'll pay court costs on top of them, right?
Yes.
So, being an unassuming individual, I just got on with it and paid it, right? But in 2017, I had a heart attack and I was in hospital for 7 weeks. When I came out, there was a summons on the doorstep to go to court. So I went to court, and what I noticed in and around, there was lots of people milling around, and I started to ask the question, what benefits are you on, right? And everybody that was in the court was in receipt of benefits, which triggered the alarm that, hang on a minute, everybody here is on benefits. They're targeting people on benefits.
Right.
So the reason why they target people on benefits is because automatic deduction from the benefit at the source, from the DWP, right? And it's taken out your benefits. Hence the move over to universal credits. It makes it a lot easier on universal credits for them to take money off your benefits when you're signing on to universal credits. Whilst you're on individual benefits, it makes it that little bit more difficult, because they can't touch disability living allowance, because that's a tax-free income, right? They can't touch a child benefit. They can't touch your child tax credits, right? The only thing they can touch is your housing benefit and your council tax. So what happens is, when the universal credits, when they group them all together, they can take whatever they want whenever they need.
Oh, yes, I
flights,
see, yeah, because it's
right?
one fund then.
Yeah, because it's one fund, they can sanction you, yeah.
Yeah.
So I realised that I submitted a direct debit, and that's resubmitted every year by the council. And slowly but surely, over the past few years, that amount has gone up and up and up and up. And last year, I paid £617 towards my council tax. But then I began to work out, well, if I got a 25% discount, and their rate
As
is
a
now at
25% discount as a single
as a single parent, yeah.
adult. Yeah, single parent.
Um, but the council put up their rates last year to 35% towards council tax. But what they're not telling the benefit recipient is part of their uh, housing benefit allowance is also a government allowance that's paid towards your council tax. Now, after a lot of pressure, I got them to disclose how much council tax was paid last year. And the government paid £699 towards my council tax. So that halves the bill to begin with. So then I've got 25% discount off that. And if I'm paying 35%, well, 35% minus 25% is 10%. So I should only be paying 10% of the council tax bill, £76. So why did I pay £617? Because they're deducting at source without you realizing what you're entitled to. That's where the government fraud comes in.
And you've got no control over that because they're just doing it.
Well, no, I mean, I could stop the direct debit.
Yeah.
But then I'd get a summons. You're not paying council tax, and you're back in the same boat.
Yes,
exactly. But when it comes down to the summons, well, back when this thing was introduced by Ian Duncan Smith, the council tax year begins in April. You receive a notice of summons in the March to attend court in the June. By that time, you're behind on your council tax by 1 month. What they're not declaring is you're getting money from the government for your council tax, so you're not behind, right?
Right.
So the summons is illegitimate. They can't issue a summons because you're not behind on your council tax because the government are paying it, half of your council tax.
Yeah. So I've just had one of those penny drop moments there as you explained that. Because how can you be behind? You can't be behind if you're not the one paying it, the government is.
Yeah, that's
so if
right.
anyone's got to appear in court for non-failure of council tax, it's the government saying, you're a month late. What's the problem? Don't let this chap over here, leave him alone.
Well, they send out a form every April of what you're entitled to towards your housing benefit and council tax, right? Now, my previous address, the government was paying a government allowance of £173 a week to the council. Okay, out of that, over the year, what the government have paid to the council is £8,500–9,000. But in actual benefit receipts, I've got from the towards my £1,145. So there's a £3,500 drift that's missing, and which is more than enough to pay the whole of your council tax.
Yes,
right? Which I believe is what they've claimed for. So the introduction of a percentage that you're paying towards your council tax is something that the council have introduced, not the government, right? So they're taking money from the government, they're taking money from the benefit recipient, right? But the way they take it from the benefit recipient is they're overcharging the benefit recipient. They're not charging them correctly. They're overcharging. For the last 9 years, they've overcharged me on council tax. And last year, like I say, it was £617, which is a massive amount. That's half the council tax. That's 50%. You've got to ask the question, why am I paying 50%? So I looked into it, and it turns out they've been overcharging on council tax. So then when they issue this summons to go to court, right, you can't be behind on your council tax. The court issues you a fine, £100, £125 plus court costs, right? But when they issue a block summons, it's for 1,000 people, 10,000 people, 15,000 people at a time. But the block summons costs £150 to issue. They're claiming the court costs from every individual at £150 that's named on the summons. So the council's making money off it. The magistrates court's making money off it, right? And we're talking about to the tune of millions and millions of pounds. There's about 20 million people actually receiving benefits such as, pensions, tax credits and everything else. There's 4.5–5 million people on the dole. And in the Lincolnshire area, there's 220,000 people that's on housing benefits. Could you imagine issuing every one of those with a county court summons, right? Whether you choose to go or don't, you're still going to get fined. So
Mm.
all of those 225,000 people are being fined 125 pound plus court costs. Um, the council's getting their money back from issuing the summons to begin with, and we're talking millions and millions of pounds worth of fraud.
You certainly are. Can I ask you then, what happens? You turned up, and many people don't turn up to these bulk hearings
Yeah.
because they say you don't have to. And
Well, I was offering to represent everybody that was in the court.
right,
I went
okay,
around and said, right, so do you mind if I represent you? Right. And it was they had their own legal representative from the council come and spoke to me. When I explained I'd just come out of hospital to this summons and it looks like you're targeting people on benefits, he said, look, if you agree to set up a direct debit, we don't have to go through the legal process. So
yeah,
I agreed to that, right?
right.
So I didn't actually have to go to court. I wasn't, because when they're issuing that summons and they issue a fine, you've broken the law.
Hmm.
Technically you've broken the law, which is why they've issued you the fine, right?
Right. Well, when you say the law, of course, many of my viewers will say that's just the legalese that you've broken a policy
Yeah,
rather than law. But yeah, I take your point. So that's very interesting. So how many people, if in one of these bulk hearings they can hear? Well, we saw in Portsmouth that 6,000 they can just sit
yeah.
there and rubber stamp, bang, 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 and away. And in that day, millions of pounds have been earned. Which could have paid for all the services,
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah.
But no, then they are forcing you to pay all this money. How many people were roughly did turn up on that day?
On the day I turned up, my hearing was in the morning. There's 50, 60 people there.
Right. And so that's probably a small percentage of the number that were sent these hearings because they clearly
Yeah,
couldn't act. If everybody turned up and wanted to go through the process and say, well, I want to defend myself. I mean, what would have stopped you going in and saying, well, I was away. I couldn't pay it because I wasn't here.
yeah.
I'd been in hospital. As surely they would have used that or you could have used that as a defence, but not
Well,
everybody.
that's their cover up, isn't it? I mean, they're issuing the summons. The year begins in April. They issue a letter in the March, and you're in court in the June. So there's, unless you respond to the summons and set up a direct debit within from March to June, you're
Mm,
going to have to pay a fine and the court costs.
yes,
People don't realise. What people don't realise is, like I say, a portion of your council tax is paid by the government automatically. So you
right.
can't be behind. So the summons is a false summons.
It's
It's a
a
false
full summons.
declaration. Yeah. So by the
So that
magistrates' courts executing the summons, they're committing fraud.
right. So here's a question: was the summons, do you believe, actually from the magistrates' court? Because what we're beginning to understand
No.
is it's from the council,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so if it's from the council, it's not from the court.
No.
Which so if the council is the claimant, you're the defendant. How in any legal service is it that the claimant is the one who sends you the summons, not the court?
Because the council they prey on the ignorant. We are ignorant to this,
Yes,
and not a lot of people like the idea of going to court to represent themselves, or not a lot of people will challenge. It's just a bit like getting a speeding ticket,
yes,
from a camera. You don't challenge it. You either pay it,
yes.
or you go on the course, because you don't want to incur further costs. Um,
No,
which is a funny story. I did challenge a speeding ticket, and I went to court and I challenged it, and I ended up with a £1,600 fine. So then I challenged that, and I actually used Google Earth to show the distances and the times over the distance to prove that the speeding ticket was false. It was inaccurate. And the guy who went to court that represented the ticketing agency, he didn't bother turning up because as we're talking, the clock is ticking away second by
yes,
second. And what he said in a statement was, I thought that he was speeding. I picked up my camera, aimed it, and pulled the trigger, and he was speeding. Well, all that took 8 seconds for him to do. So you've got to add 8 seconds to what's on the clock, which puts you at 400, 500 meters away. And where we're talking in Grimsby, we've got the flyover. So it puts me beyond the flyover where he can't see me at Victor Street. Impossibility. And the court threw it out. Um, but
Well,
but when you talk about a fine, much like the fine with the council tax, yeah, it goes to the magistrates' courts, not the county courts, simply because it's one of those things that, we've got Road Traffic Act. The magistrates deal with that because that's what the law says and that's what the penalty is.
yes.
And it's very much the same with the council. Now, the council are not a judicial body.
No. But
They can't issue a summons.
No, that was my point, really. How is it that the council are issuing a summons and then telling you to go to court? So a friend of mine is in a similar situation with the council tax. And I saw the paperwork and I said, this has come from the council, not the magistrates' court. And what was interesting on there, it said, please check with us first at the council to make sure that you have an appointment on the day before you turn up.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, hold on a minute. If you've got a summons from the court, why do you check with the claimant to get permission or to check that there's an appointment? The summons is the appointment.
Because when they issue the block summons, right, you've got 100,000, 10,000 names on that block summons.
Yeah.
Right. The court, the justice of the clerk, what he will do is he will look down the list, see if your name's on the list, right? Because it's on the block summons for non-payment of council tax. Then they're verifying that you're on that particular list, right? In reality, the council is not a judicial body. They can't issue with a summons. It has to be issued by the court. Now, the difference between like yourself and me, if you're full-time work, right, your council tax you'll pay by direct debit. You don't question how much your council tax is because you get your bill and you pay it accordingly. Whereas you're on benefits, they're taking it from source. So that when they issue this block summons, the council and the magistrates' courts are working in unison with each other, right?
Yes.
Been to court on a number of occasions with the DWP and with the council, and the first thing the county court system or the magistrates' court is side with the local authorities.
But they shouldn't do that.
No,
I mean, it's the justice. This is complete injustice, and regardless that it's the local council, they shouldn't be chummying up because that shows bias. No, and bias is illegal.
Well, it's not just bias. I mean, on the legal regulations, the court's supposed to be independent and impartial, right?
Yes.
If anything, it should go before a tribunal. Not a through the legal process where you're being fined. If you're being fined, the court has to be issued. The summons has to be issued by the court because it's a county court summons for you to attend court where you incur the fine, right? But you're incurring a fine irrespective of what the circumstances when you attend court.
But I suppose if you can prove that, and because if you can prove that it's an illegal summons, then really it's null and void. But
well, yeah, because if the government are paying £600 towards the council tax, you're not behind.
No, exactly.
If somebody in work gets a full year to pay the council tax, right, you can pay it on the 31st of March, before the new year. You can pay the entirety of your council tax and not be penalised for it. Yes. What the council are doing is they're targeting people on benefits at source so that they get a direct debit set up at source. But the thing is, they're not declaring what they're getting from the government, so they're overcharging on the council tax. So it's win-win all the way for the council.
Yes, I can see.
Because they're making money from the summons. They're making money from obviously the court costs that they get back from the magistrates' courts. Plus, they're making the money for overcharging your council tax.
Yes.
So they're making money hand over fist.
Hand over fist. And there's nothing you can do because, as you say, you're on the benefits for the reasons that you're on the benefits, which are all the laudable reasons that you would be on them. But they're just taking the advantage of the low-hanging fruit because they go, oh, well, we can just easily make out that these guys are behind the times by a month, and yet they've already been paid by the government, as you so rightly said. I mean, this is extreme fraud.
It is, yeah. You're talking. I worked it out in Lincolnshire. There's 220,000 people receiving housing benefit in Lincolnshire. So we're talking Grimsby, Cleethorpes, Brigg, the surrounding areas, everywhere in Lincolnshire, 222,000. Right, those people would have been issued a court summons, right, to
Yes.
attend court. Right, a lot of people would set up would have set up
And
an
an
automatic
illegal
direct
court
debit.
summons at that.
Yeah, yeah, and a lot of those would have set up an automatic direct debit because they don't want to go to court, right? Not realizing that like the government is paying towards your council tax,
Mm.
right? Now, you know about the benefit cap, yeah. The benefit cap was introduced to people on benefits. You can't get anything more than £500 towards your rent, okay? But the council in Grimsby will only pay 90% of what you're entitled to, okay? So you're automatically getting less than what the benefit cap is. Now, when you're receiving your council tax bill on your rent bill each year, they're telling you what you're entitled to weekly. Now, if they're telling me that I'm entitled to £173 a week, well, you work it out. That's £600 a month.
Mm.
If I'm receiving £490 or £380 towards my rent, where's the rest going?
Yeah,
Because they're
exactly.
claiming that from the government.
Mark, this is a dreadful situation. Millions of people up and down the country are going to be suffering this, and many of them probably haven't even a clue that this is how it's working.
Yeah, this is exactly how it works. They you know most people just tend to get on with the daily lives. They don't
Yes, of
want to
course.
they don't want the stress of getting involved with courts or anything else, right? Or the council they're preying on it. If you don't challenge it, they'll take it all the more. But if you do challenge it in the realms of a court, they'll turn around and say, "Well, it's an error. It's a mistake." It's not an error. It's not a
Mm.
mistake because they're doing it across the board, right? And that is a major fraud, right? The police should be looking into this because it's not just one council; it's all the councils are doing it. They're all profiting from it. So then, when you hear on the news that councils are declaring bankruptcy, you've got to ask the question: well, how can you be declaring bankruptcy when nationally you've made in excess of £2.3 billion from fraud?
Well, that is it. That again, that is another interesting question because they're all saying that they're several £1 million in debt and they're going towards bankruptcy. Yet they're being paid by the government all this money and they're claiming it off and getting you guys to settle the bills.
That's right, yeah. Because you, as a working person, if the council went to get council tax from you as a working person, they would have to go to the court, right? The court would have to issue a summons, so it's costing more than £150, right? They then have to get a barrister to represent them in court, £1,500, £2,000. You would either represent yourself or get somebody legal to represent you, which is another £1,500, £2,000. So ultimately, those court costs are racked up to £5,000 in a blink of an eye,
Mm.
right? So they're not going to take you to court because it's going to cost too much. So the people that are targeting are people on benefits because
Yes. Well,
they
I
don't
mean, the
understand what
advantage of
system.
if some, a working person, as you say, the advantage is they've got 10 months in which to pay this.
Yeah,
And if you get a bit behind, they don't seem to sort of chase you up and then say, well, you're a month behind. You might do after, say, 3 months or something. But this is unfair targeting because they know they've got you at source, which, of
it's
course, if
classic discrimination.
yes,
Yes, because
but
when you identify a group of people, i.e., people on benefits, you're identifying them as a group as a whole, and
mm,
then you're targeting that group, and then you're fining that group, and then that group is then paying court costs on top of those fines. Yeah, but it's targeting a group. When you target any one group in society, that's discrimination.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this then, because I think they're trialing in different parts of the country universal income,
Yeah,
and they want to try and get everybody on this universal income, which is a kind of little, it sounds great, a little carrot stick everybody gets. But of course, the one who dishes out the drugs can
yeah,
control the amount of those drugs. And if you are behind, say, on a council tax, or of which they've decided you're behind, by the way,
yeah.
not as in your case, this technique, this fraudulent technique, could be used right across the board if people are then dependent on an income, as indeed you are if you're on whatever other benefits you are. But if they're trying to put the whole country, as I believe that's the plan, on a universal income, and then you do something that upsets them,
They
they've
can
got the
sanction you,
exactly. I mean,
right?
This
The,
is.
the, the irony is, you'll know about this new law that's coming in where they can access your bank accounts,
Mm,
right? And they're using the pseudonym that it's for benefit cheats, people that are committing benefit fraud. We're moving to a cashless society, right?
yes.
So your income is done by backs direct to your bank account. Your benefits go by backs direct into your bank account. So any other form of financial, you know, finances that go into your bank, it's got to be, it can be traced back to its source, apart from cash, if you're making cash deposits. Now, if you're a criminal, you're not going to make a cash deposit. You're going to keep it home and pay for things cash. So it's 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 a way of them gaining access to not just people on benefits bank accounts, everybody that's got a bank account, to access the bank accounts to see where their incomes are coming from. I mean, we're talking data protection issues that across the board. To me, it's giving the system too much power, right? It's
Giving them
not
all
being
power.
regulated. It's not being regulated, and it's giving the government too much power to look into your personal affairs. It's like if I spend £120 on shopping, they're going, well, you shouldn't be spending £120 on shopping. We're only allowing you this, so we're going to dock your money. You know,
Yes.
um,
Yes.
that's what it looks like. Looks like, to me, it reminds me of George Orwell's 1984.
Mm.
Is it George Orwell?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. When you're talking about
Big
the
brother.
aspects of 1984, we're roaming into those grounds now, where we're being monitored on a daily basis through CCTV. Now we're being monitored online, and now we're being monitored through our bank accounts. You know,
Exactly. And you won't
um,
be able to do anything without your digital ID. Everything will be logged to your digital ID. And when probably next year the banks will crash and we're all moved on to these CBDCs,
yeah.
then that's it. Cash will disappear and you've got no alternative. And they're controlling everything.
I mean, this is what I think find the issue is if you move to a cashless society and it's all digital currency. There are people like me that are in the poorer echelons of society where you might not have a bank account, you might not
Mm,
have a post office account. So how do you live without cash? I think you've got to have a cash in society to sustain the rest of society. What this lockdown did during the pandemic was prove that as a country, it's unsustainable. We can't survive because we import that much now from abroad that come lockdown, you can't make those imports and everything. You've seen it on the shop shelves; they're empty. This kind of stuff. There are too many people living in Great Britain at this point in time. We can't self-sustain ourselves in situations like a national pandemic where you've got a lockdown for an extended period of time. And yet the government seem to take in from the poorest of the poor, and not taxing the rich in the way that they maybe should be taxed. So, you know, um, I think what the councils are doing is I remember watching Mr. Sunak saying he's going to, he's created so many billions more for people on benefits. But if the council are doing what they're doing and they're taking it with the other hand, well, he's given the council permission to cut benefits.
mm.
Right? So he's giving with one hand, right, and standing on a soapbox and saying, "Look, this is what we're going to do." But on the other hand, the underside of it, he's been underhanded and telling his councils, you know, cut the benefits by whatever means necessary. And from what I understand, when they do cut your benefits or sanction your benefits, the people that sanction your benefits get a bonus on their wages for sanctioning you.
Right.
You know,
Yeah, that's just
um,
dreadful.
it is. It's bad.
So, in your community then, and other people in your, how are you doing? Are you managing to cope?
Well, I'm one of those people that pays my bills,
Right.
right? I've got no food in. I've got nothing in my cupboards, right? I depend on the corner shop at the moment, where food prices are higher. I had my car stolen on the 2nd of November. It was returned on the 3rd, and the insurance company's dragging their heels about sorting that out. So I can't get a new, vehicle. So I'm sort of housebound. Um, And the knock-on effect is look, my eldest is at uni. He doesn't come home until the 16th. So gas and electricity, because I pay by the meter, with a key fob,
Yes.
the the electric and gas prices are supposed to have come down, but I'm still paying the existing amount that it was set at. So I'm overpaying for my gas and my electricity, and not my gas and electricity at the present rate. Um, and you can imagine, when you're paying, 60, £70 to your gas and 60, £70, that's, 140, £180 out your benefits. You've got the council who's over declaring, how much council tax you owe, and billing me for that. Um, you know, at the end of the day, I ask the question, well, where are these food banks? Because I struggle. And at
Mm.
times, I feed my children. I put them before myself. They're fed before I feed myself. Um, and what's been happening is my son's mother has been subsidising and sending shopping in to help us out through the month, because the way payments go into your bank is every 4 weeks or every 2 weeks. Yeah, it's not on a monthly basis like on the first of every month. So you can calculate when your bills are going out, and you can't micromanage your money. So at times you're 10 days without any money whatsoever. Um, and if you run out of electricity or gas in those 10 days, it's just a flop. You know,
Mm.
um, the government claim that they're trying to help the poorest in society, by giving these government handouts. But why don't they just pay that out in extra on your benefits on a monthly basis? Why give it at certain times a year? Why don't they, if it's at
Yes.
600, £1,000, pay you incrementally on top of your benefits through the year, raise your benefits up? And I think the reason why they do that is because when everybody's on universal credits, you know, like I say, it's a new contract, and any new contract, like a new contract of employment, if you agree to work for £4.60 an hour because it's your new contract, that's what you sign up to. And with universal credits, you're losing benefits when you transfer over, and you're on the new credit system under universal credits, where everything's lumped together. You can be sanctioned and based upon your gross income rather than your net income, which I find ironic.
What do, what's your opinion of the government at the moment? We've got an election coming. I mean, is there any hope with any party? Do you see?
Well, when Mr. Sunak was Chancellor in 2020, he introduced what was called the Adult Social Fund on top of your council tax, right? In 2020, it was £145. Now it's £175 for adult social care, right? But adult social care comes under the NHS, and it's not shouldn't come under the council. So that's an extra amount they've added. Now, when I read up about the reason why that happened, and this began in May of 2020, when they started to take this adult social care into consideration, um, they said it was for the most vulnerable people, that, people that were paying more than £150 towards their council tax, because of their vulnerabilities, it would reduce that. Well, I've had 5 heart attacks since 2010, four of them in the last 3 years. I've got spinal issues. I'm disabled. I've got a blood condition through my medication, which causes thrombosis, blood clots. My condition is now considered irreversible, i.e., coronary heart disease is completely irreversible. If that doesn't put me in the most vulnerable group,
Mm.
right, then what does? And I'm still paying the £175 on top of my council tax because he included that in 2020. And I think he did that because he foresaw the pandemic. So they knew before May 2020 what had happened with the pandemic, and there was going to be a lockdown. So then he started charging people, and you're being charged just as much as me, right? And he's charged everybody 100, back in 2020, £145 on top of your council tax bill that you will not know about unless you've got it itemized, and that's nationally. So we're talking a third of the world, a third of the population in England. Because the way I look at England as a whole, if we've got 75, 80 million people who live in Britain, a third of those are going to be youngsters up to the age of 18. A third of those are going to be pensioners of retireable age, and then you've got a third of working class. So a third of the total amount of people living in Great Britain are paying £145 a year that they don't know they're paying. It's now it's 175 towards this adult social fund, which should come under the NHS, and that's being paid for by your taxes.
That's another. I didn't know that, so I'm absolutely gobsmacked.
Yeah.
Um, what's Christmas going to look like for you?
It's got to the point where my Christmas is, if I've got it, I'll give it.
Mm.
I'll do my best. If not, we'll just have to wait till after Christmas. Things will settle down, and I've been
I
saying that for the
suppose.
past 3 years.
Yes, I mean, what I'm trying to get at is, are you optimistic that any government is ever going to sort this out in your favour, or do you think that having thus far found a way of
We
extracting money
we
or making money,
we need
what
a
would be
complete
your answer?
change. We need a complete change of the political process. The way the political system is set now is it divides public opinion, and it does that on purpose.
Mm.
Because if we all stood together and we all said no, right, and we all challenged, they'd have to change their policies. The reason why we've got different like Conservative, Labour, Lib Dem, or whatever, the reason why we've got different parties is to split public opinion. And once you divide the public, yeah, you've got what you want. You ultimately retain power, right?
Mm.
So
Mm.
that's how the government retains power at the moment, right? We've seen communism fall by the wayside in Russia. It's on its way in China at the moment. We've seen in other areas their way of government when it comes to communism, it's practically dissolved, right? We're supposed to be living in a democracy, but when you start limiting your freedom of speech and introduce measures that you're being watched, you're being listened to, your bank account's being looked at. The erosion of democracy, yeah, and to the point where we're now living in a dictatorship. You know, with the council tax issue, for instance, if you're automatically being summoned, then the council, the gut, and the courts are automatically fining you. Well, that's not democracy. That's
No.
dictatorship. It's a
Yes.
kangaroo court. And I think we have to move away from the kind of political system that we have in the country. Now, some people saying, well, we should elect a president. Well, haven't we got a king?
Mm.
Initially the king was the ruler. He set the laws of the land, and woe betide it. Obviously the Magna Carta sorted all that crap out with the royals. But at the end of the day, we've got an isolated number of people in power, i.e., your MPs, that's dictating how the rest of us live our lives. And their government have invested, well, under Tony Blair's government, they invested 2,400 million in land reforms in Africa, right? And what that resulted in was black people kicking white farmers off their farms, right? Not knowing how to farm the land, so the farmland running to rack and ruin. So then the South African government asked for another 600,000 million for land reforms, and it ended up we paid 2,400 million. Tony Blair said, "No, we're not going to do this anymore." And lo and behold, within 3 months, they applied for another £600 million loan, and we gave it. And that's public money. That's coming out of
Mm.
the public purse, right? Where Saudi Arabia under Margaret Thatcher, we were paying the Saudi government £10 million a year so that they would help not support terrorists and train terrorists in their land, right? So we were paying them protection money, because if we didn't pay the Saudis that protection money, they said, well, we can't control what terrorists are, what they're
Likely to
doing
do
in our
over here.
backyard. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we were being held to ransom. A lot of the financial situation now is being put down to Brexit. I just think that's a convenient cop out.
Mm.
Prior to us going into Brexit or into Europe, we were part of the European Economic Community, right? EEC, which was ostensibly, part of being the European Commonwealth. Everywhere else had a referendum, right? We didn't have a referendum. Tony Blair signed us up into the European community, and now we're being held to account because of Brexit. But had we had a public vote prior to going into Europe, I believe that everybody would have voted no, right? So now we're having to pay millions for the cock-ups that's happened through Brexit, and it's all on the public purse. The problem is with the council tax and council. Well, under Margaret Thatcher, they sold off council properties, so your council stock's being reduced. Councils now, what they're doing is they're moving their housing stock under housing associations like Lincolnshire Housing Partnership or its predecessor Shoreline. They don't sell those properties, right? What they're doing is it's a paper shuffling exercise. They create this new department for housing so that when the council tenant makes a call to the council, say, look, I've got damp, I've got mold, etc., the council turn around and say, well, it's not us you need to speak to, you need to speak to the housing association. So they're passing the buck.
Yes.
So now you've got this big social housing situation going on, right, where you've got lots of private landlords or Havelock housing, that kind of thing. But they are closely monitored when it comes to their rent and the council tax, which is where the benefit gap comes in. Because if you're in council housing, social housing, the rent is below £500 a month. But because there's a lack of housing, I'm living in a 3-bedroom property. My son's at uni. I've just been charged £707 and 17 pence for my son being at uni because he's not present, because he's not living in the house. And it's something I'm challenging.
Right.
Right? Because they're charging what's called bedroom tax.
Yes. Yes.
Right? But looking at the information that they've given me, they've just cocked themselves up because they've shown and demonstrated for the past 9 years they've been underpaying me on my housing benefit by 14%.
Right.
So,
I mean, all what you've just told me there, and many viewers will be nodding along with you, is, I mean, we're ruled by a government or authority that we vote in that are just doing their damnedest to make our life absolute hell. I just don't understand. I mean, I've sort of woken up to this fairly recently, as you'll probably know on the channel, and you just suddenly sort of knock yourself sideways. And so how is it that we put into power governments that put anti-human policies that make our life more miserable than actually trying to make our lives better? I mean, this, you know,
when
it
you're
may be
born,
naive. It may be naive, but surely these people who are in control are supposed to be making our lives better, not worse. And
well,
why are we putting up with it?
the thing is, when we're born, we're issued with a birth certificate. Okay. Our birth certificate has got a registration number, right? And you can use that number online on the government website. It tells the government or tells you what you're worth as an individual, because we are classed as a commodity.
Yes.
Right? At your age, my age, we are worth to the government in excess of £60 million. You'll never see that in your lifetime. I'll certainly never see that in my lifetime unless I win the lottery. But that's what we're worth to the government, right? That's things such as NHS, prescriptions, all of these different things. That's what we're worth to the government, the individual. But the number that's issued on your birth certificate, well, that reminds me of when, Adolf Hitler started tattering the Jewish population in the concentration camps. They issued a number on the forearm, which corresponded as to when they went to the gas ovens. But we were indentured in slavery from the moment we was born.
Yes.
Your children's children are going to be paying off the national debt. When you look at the national debt,
well, then anyone will ever pay it off, will they?
Well, no, because we're talking about 330 trillion pounds worth of debt.
Well, exactly. I mean, they'll just never. It wouldn't be possible to pay it.
Well, if you're in debt, if you're in debt, you'll not get a loan. Yeah.
Right.
Right. But everybody lives or tries to live within their means. Yeah. You're not going to get a bank loan, for instance, for £25,000 if you're on a low income, because the way things are set up now, you'll get declined.
Yes. Yes.
Right. Now, you've
But
got
this
a
is what I
bank,
mean. But this is
you've
what
got the
I'm.
government that's, ostensibly making billions and billions of pounds a week off
Yes,
inland
I
income
suppose
tax.
what I'm trying to get to is why are we just putting up with it? Why are we, the British population, the people of all these independent countries, the Englishmen, the Welshmen, the Scots, why are we putting up with this?
We put up with it because it's like as a child when your parents do things for you, you don't have to do them. You don't actually realize the extent of what the cost of living is when you're a kid. And we move into adulthood and we let these other people take charge, and
Mm.
these policies are implemented for our benefit. But
But they're
how can
clearly
it be
not.
that it's clearly not for our benefit?
Exactly.
And these people are getting rich off it.
Yes.
You know,
I
I
mean, it's
saw.
just. I mean, the point is, at some point, we've got to say this has got to stop. We can go along with it. And we know what's going on. We see the fraud. You've illustrated the fraud, but what's going to happen? Are the government going to go? Oh, we saw this thing on Richard Vogue's YouTube channel. They know about the fraud. We better stop. I mean, it's
No,
not going to happen, is it?
this is the. I could take this. I could take my case with the fraud to the police and say, look, this is blatant fraud. They're taking this
Yeah.
money out of my bank account, right? It's not legitimate. That's theft, right?
Yes.
And that's
Yes.
fraud, right? The police would turn around and say, "Oh, it's got nothing to do with this because
It's a government
it's
matter
yeah,
on your
it's a civil
bike.
issue." They'll turn around and say, "No, it's a civil issue. It's between you and the council. It's nothing to do with us."
Well, it's a
That's
criminal
what the
issue.
problem is.
Yes.
You know, um, it's the difference between the judicial system and the civil system. You know, anything
Well,
to do
look,
with local
I suppose the
government.
more we can do is make people absolutely aware of what's going on. And as the body of evidence starts to amount, that people really begin to understand how much they're being conned by not only the government but also by the councils, and how much fraud is going on. Eventually, at some point, people are going to turn around en masse and say enough is enough. And
The,
I
the,
guess the
the
purpose of
closest we came to it was the poll tax riots in London.
right,
Right? We came very, very close to overturning the system as it was. Now, obviously, the poll tax. A lot of people say, "Well, Margaret Thatcher this, Margaret Thatcher that." In general, she had a pretty good idea. If everybody was charged £250 a year poll tax, right, which takes care of the council tax issue, that's fine. But Labour Party use that particular monopoly because in their own districts they raised the poll tax to 350, £400. So then everybody's kicking off in those areas,
yes,
which caused the poll tax riots. Now we're paying 1,400, £1,500 in Band D for your council tax, irrespective. And the regulations stipulate anybody over the age of working age over the 18 is eligible to pay council tax. That's the clause, right? So at the end of the day, we're still paying more out, right? And it takes a national movement, people to march down on London and say, no, we're not
yeah.
putting up with this. Um, but
Well,
this is the reason why you've got restrictions on freedom of speech, what
yes,
you can do on the internet. Now you can be penalised for speaking out of context. Be prosecuted for it. Um, and I was watching your youth channel the other day, which was going on about the system, the legal system that we have. We have a system called de jure, which is under a French system. You're guilty until you can prove your innocence.
yeah. When did that change?
That's always been the case. I mean, in this country, that's always been the case. We operate a system of de jure. You're guilty until you prove your innocence. Now, we all presume that we're innocent until proven guilty. Yeah.
Yeah,
When you go to a court of law, it's a system of de jure. Now, if you've not got an alibi for something, if you're accused of something, you've got an alibi, you're going to get prosecuted because you can't prove your innocence. It's harder to prove your innocence than it is for them to prove your guilt, right?
yeah.
So, ostensibly, what it is we are all guilty people, right? We've just got to cross that line, yeah, to break the law for them to prosecute us. That's what the
Yeah.
problem is.
They
Um,
hate us, don't they? I mean, at the end of the day, it seems that they absolutely hate us.
Well, we're the source of the piggy bank. It's what we pay. We pay so they don't have to.
Hmm.
That's
Mark,
that's the the phrase I would coin: we pay that they don't have to, because when you talk about the Grimsby MP, I don't know what her name is, but when you talk about the Grimsby MP, she spends most of the time in London. Well, if she's in London, we are paying for a second home because she's
Right.
going to have a flat or a house in London, which is being paid for by the public, yeah, so that she can spend time in London. Now, Christmas time, who doesn't want to spend Christmas in London? You know, lots of people go out to London Christmas time in the new year. So now we've got a local MP that spends most of the time in London, right? Claiming expenses, for a meal allowances and stuff like that on her expense account. She's paying 120, £200 for a bottle of wine on her expense account in London, which goes to the public. Yeah, it's coming out of the public purse. But we're not just talking about Grimsby MP, we're talking about all MPs.
Yes, and I mean,
they all go down to London. They've all got to attend, Parliament at some point, and they've all got second homes in London, which the public are paying for.
Yeah. Mark, I'm going to have to draw this to a close, but just to reiterate the original point that you made, the government are paying towards the council tax, and they pay a month late. And so
no, it's not being paid. It's not paid. It's not paid a month late. Amongst your benefit allowance, the government have allowed you an element towards your council tax. So I get housing benefit every 2 weeks. Okay, right?
Yes,
and it's paid every 2 weeks.
I suppose I put that they pay. The money is available, but because of the direct debit, and they take it a month late, it looks like it's you that's the one that's not paid it when it's the government who. Well, they've got the money.
The government subsidised council tax anyway.
Yeah.
And what they're doing is the council, because of the way the system is set up, you're overpaying on your council tax. I've done it in the last few years. I'm going to claim. I watched one of the chaps on your website the other day about his direct debit indemnity by claiming it back.
Oh yes, I think Tim Davis. I think his name was.
I'm going to go down that avenue and reclaim all my housing benefit back, or my council tax back, because I can prove that I've been overcharged council tax. The irony is somebody's got to take a look at this, and somebody's got to bring it to justice, because at the end of the day, we're talking about millions of pounds worth of fraud.
And people, I mean, and clearly people are suffering because they're then paying all these bloody court bills and fines on top of not having the money they're supposed to be being given anyway.
What I find ironic is the government's giving you these handouts, because of how the economy is and how inflation is, and yet the council are saying, well, no, hang on a minute, we're going to take this off you.
We're going to take it off you anyway.
Yeah.
Mark, it's been a delight to talk to you. Thank you for sharing your information with me and the audience. It'd be interesting to see what the people in the comments say.
Yeah.
I wish you a fabulous Christmas as best you can.
Yeah.
And at some point, this has got to stop. This can't go on. I think people are beginning to sort of hear these stories left, right, and centre, becoming a lot more aware of it. Conversations like this have got to keep going, even though they've got the online safety bill to try and prevent these kind of conversations, as you alluded to. But it's been fascinating to hear your story, and let's hope that somewhere along the line this gets sorted out, because it can't go on. Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you very much for having me on your show.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Cheers. Thank you very much indeed.
So there you are, ladies and gentlemen. That's Mark, and opening up another can of worms with the government and the council, and how they're in cahoots with one another yet again. And no doubt we'll be visiting this subject many more times as we try to expose what the injustice is. I mean, it's if it was just all made up rubbish, it would be one thing. But these are injustices affecting real people every day, 365 days of the year. And it cannot go on. And I'm sick and tired of it. And when I speak to people like Mark and other people that I know are all suffering, this is diabolical. This is not the way that we are supposed to be living in this country. And we, the people, have got to do something about it. I'll be back with more monologues, hopefully as my health now improves after my recent illness, and, of course, more wonderful interviews. But meanwhile, from Mark and myself, thanks for watching. Goodbye.
Thank you.